Oh, those buggers. The little jerks even ate my sedum. Good morning. We are outside today in the garden, and it's not raining or snowing or anything. Imagine that. Let me just put my bag down. We're gonna head out to the greenhouse. Hello, sunshine. We're gonna go open up the greenhouse. We're gonna uncover all of the spring crops. And then let me tell you about a little problem I've been having with the deer. Every day I come out here, and as long as it is fairly bright enough to warm up the temperature, if it's cold and overcast, I don't have to open the door. But most days I open up the door, and then I open up this window. Let's see what we've got. It's emptier than it was. I've done a lot of planting. The ranunculus in crates are looking fantastic. Almost all the vegetables have been planted at the school. The only thing I didn't get done was the spinach down there. There's a few herbs. There's parsley, cilantro, and a little bit of rosemary down there on the floor. Then we have a little statice stalk, more statice, asters, my rudbeckia up there, and a little bit of snapdragons. Mostly just random things left. Some sweet peas for my neighbor, some asparagus seedlings, the rest of my parsley. Oh, Mechanopsis. Always have to show those off. There are my 2 Mechanopsis seedlings, looking gorgeous. I could probably plant those out actually in a week or 2. And just for reference, here are the ones that overwintered in the ground. They are looking awesome, and hopefully we'll get flowers from these ones this year. I have a grass seed experiment going on back there. A few leftover Lysianthus, and actually that is what we have to go and look at outside next. Oh, I forgot about these. These are Brussels sprouts, so I guess I didn't plant all the vegetables. I decided to take these back because I'm going to separate them and pot them up, and then I'll plant them out when they're a bit stronger. Then I have some Didiscus. I have a tray of pink and a tray of blue. These are going to get planted out this week as well. Continuing the revolving door of seedlings. Once all of these things get planted out or potted up, that's going to clear out a bunch of room to bring some more things outside from the grow room. Next, we're going to come up to the upper garden and remove all of this frost cloth. Most of these are my early season flowers, just transplanted over the last week or 2. And the frost cloth isn't really for the low temperatures. It's been pretty good at night, but it's the only method of animal prevention that I have that's big enough to cover this entire space. Unfortunately though, I'm starting to see some new holes that have popped up in here, so I don't think it's working as well as I think it is. So this row of ranunculus is looking fantastic. Now that means that I have a whole row, and actually a little bit on the top of the next row, of ranunculus planted in the ground, as well as those 6 crates that I have in the greenhouse. And I expect those to bloom a little earlier. I'd like to see blooms on those within the next 2 to 3 weeks actually, and then hopefully these will be delayed about 2 weeks, and then I'll have a nice succession. There is a lot of new growth on these, a lot of new leaves just starting to push out. And I expected to see that because our temperatures took a bit of a jump up about 4 days ago. So it's nice to see that these are responding that quickly. And it's not the air temperature that I'm concerned about as much as the soil temperature. So the fact that the temperature's not dipping quite as much at night means that the soil temperature's been able to come up a little bit too. And I'm sure that is responsible for all this new growth. It has been windy, hence all the leaves. So we have ranunculus to about here, and then I have a whole bunch of stalk. Now I had meant to plant some stalk in crates too, but that didn't happen, mostly because I knew I was going to run out of greenhouse space and I wanted to prioritize the ranunculus. Now I'd like to say that I have 1 row of each thing, but I kept running out of plants a few feet before the end, so the end of this row is statice, and the entire next row is statice as well actually. These have grown nicely since I planted them actually, lots of new growth already, and they were planted about 2 weeks after the ranunculus. And then the most recent planting is this row here of snapdragons. Probably another week or 2 before I start to see a lot of new growth on those. And I was a little concerned about my snapdragons actually, because when I planted them they had almost 0 roots to them. They hadn't grown out into their cells at all, which was concerning. They had a little bit of roots though. I was just hoping that they would survive planting. They've been out here almost a week and they all look okay. They are not dead, but you know, not doing much either. So as soon as I start to see a little bit of growth, I'll be able to breathe easier on those, but I do have a little bit more started too, and I think I'm gonna start some more also. It's not just the seedlings looking good, but there are lots of signs of spring. I haven't had a deer problem in my yard at all until last year, and they came out in full force. I'm not 100% sure why, but I do have my theories. This bed, I thought I dug all my daffodils out of last year and moved, but obviously I missed some. So I didn't want to use the entire bed for one thing. I didn't want to lose these daffodils, so what I did was I planted anything that I only had a few of. So there are quite a few new feverfew plants. I have just a few Iceland poppies, a dozen or so sweet peas, and a half a tray of a brand new yarrow that's called the Pearl. I'm really excited about this one. It looks a little bit like a baby's breath, but it's a yarrow. And they've definitely flopped over since I planted them, although the frost cloth could be to blame for that. I'm gonna have to put some hoops over these, I think. But what I might also do is pinch them, even if I just do half of them, just to gauge the difference. But you can see one daffodil back there, almost ready to bloom. These ones here have come up a few inches, no flower buds yet. And then all throughout this bed, there's a whole bunch more that are just starting to peek through. Now the deer problem really is a problem because I don't have a huge budget to spend on a giant deer fence. I may have to shell out and get some kind of an electric fencing situation. It's so bright out that I should have my hat today, but honestly, I can't find it. So unfortunately, what I have for deer protection is whatever I could find in a moment, usually in a quick half an hour to an hour break in my teaching, which is really the only work time that I've had so far because it is a really busy spring. I need to find some shade. That's a little better. My piano studio is maxed out at 46 students. Not just kids, I have a half a dozen adults too, which is wonderful. And we're hosting our spring recital in about a week and a half, so it is definitely a busy season. And that happens every year in the crossover period when the teaching is at its busiest and all of the spring planting has to be done. Arguably, the most amount of work that I have to do in garden season happens before my average last frost date. But that's okay, my teaching season wraps up in 8 weeks and I know that's gonna go by in a hurry and then I'm gonna miss all of my wonderful students. But I do look forward to the slower summer days. So back to the deer problem. I pretty much grab what I can find first and I make it work. I don't like to do any major purchases unless I absolutely have to. And so what ends up happening is stuff like this. Now there is 2 levels of ridiculousness to this bed, and you can see that it already looks pretty terrible. And you can see that the tulips themselves look pretty terrible, and that's because the deer found them before I even noticed that all this foliage had come back. So apparently I did not dig up all of my bulbs here last year. And at the most, I'm hoping for maybe a couple of dozen bonus blooms out of this bed. Because this is the second year for these, and I'm remembering now that I had a few varieties on the ends that I didn't really harvest because I missed them. So that is not a big problem, but I put down the black netting, and then within a week discovered that the deer just stomped them down and ate as much as they could right through them, which is why I put this white netting over the top, which definitely has bigger holes, but the extra layer seems to have thrown them off just a little bit, and I think it's worked. But what a mess. Now this one I am even more mad about. This has worked for a week. You can see one bed here looks fantastic. I just put this over at night. I looked at this through the window. Oh my God. This is my Lysianthus. Something has ripped a giant hole, multiple giant holes in this overnight. Now I thought that it was deer just stomping along the top, but there's mud. This is in between the beds right here. If a deer had stood on that, that would have ripped. This is in between the beds and there's mud all over it. So I'm thinking that may have been a raccoon. Let's uncover this and see what we're dealing with. So the first bed is completely untouched, luckily. Second bed, a bunch of my plants have been ripped out. Some of them have been stomped all over and there's a giant hole. So let's get that fixed ASAP. Why is it always the expensive stuff? There we go. This was so satisfying when it was finished. I made such a perfect grid. There's 60 Lysianthus in each of these beds. I bought these plugs actually. An offer came from a fellow grower who lives nearby, only about 10 minutes from here. She bought way too many by accident and needed to offload them. Unfortunately, they sat in their plug trays for quite a while and I lost a few, but I'm hoping most of them will bounce back. And I have about a dozen or so left in the greenhouse that I think I'm gonna put in pots. Saffron crocus got a little bit nibbled over the winter, but they're recovering fine. There's a bed back there which has more daffodils and some feverfew. This one with Sweet William definitely looks a little rough. I'm still unsure of what that's gonna do this year, but I'm hoping for some blooms. And that one has larkspur and I think alliums. These alliums come up every year and I say I'm going to move them and then they die back and I forget. And this one, actually I think these are chives. Yeah, definitely chives. And the last two beds don't look like much, but they are both full of lilies. And they will be popping up anytime. Actually, these two beds are full of lilies. For the most part, one has all my Asiatics and one is full of the Oriental hybrids. And last year, the deer nibbled the top off of the Oriental hybrids, I believe. And I've never known deer to eat lilies, so that was fun. Actually, there are some shoots there. There's a few coming up. Some shoots come up red, depending on the variety, and some come up green. So there we go. We have lilies. I had kind of a fun idea, actually, for next winter to turn these 4 raised beds into a hoop house just for the winter. That would protect these and give me a little bit of an early start next year. So I might try to do that in the fall. Next stop on my tour of ridiculous deer protection, we have my main planting of nearly 2,000 tulips, and these I need to sell, so they need to be protected at all costs. Oh, wait. Oh, those buggers. Okay, well that's only half a dozen or so, that's not too bad. There is 3 ridiculous layers here also. There's a little bit more of that black mesh. There is a thicker type of black mesh suspended over the top, and then a bunch of this white floral netting that I put around. Unfortunately, that makes my front yard look terrible, but it's okay for now. These are all going to be gone within about 6 weeks from now, but I do need to come up with something better. I also have some tulips planted over here in front of my new deck that we put in last fall, and everything that I planted here, I made a whole video about this. It all looks fantastic. These daffodils are coming up really well. There's actually some daffodils that had been planted here from a few years ago that I didn't dig up, and they're coming up underneath my deck, so I need to deal with that somehow. But my main stand of tulips, that does not need to be covered and uncovered every day, thank goodness, but this I do. So let's do that now. And yes, they did find these a little bit before I remembered to cover them, but there are still a few dozen that should be fine. Those little jerks even ate my sedum. So there's obviously a couple lessons to be learned here. First, I think I need to come up with a deer protection system when I'm planting the tulips in the fall and not wait until the next spring when I'm going to be so busy. That's important. Second, I think I'm going to have to plant everything that needs protection in one spot, which is one of my reasonings behind building a tunnel or a little temporary winter greenhouse over these raised beds right here. But I'm actually really excited about that. It doesn't need to be very high, and I already have hoops that may work. And last, deer are jerks and they will try to destroy everything. Although I think I'm also dealing with a raccoon, or at the very least, a really destructive squirrel. So it seems that I can't win, and I have a lot of work to do this week. So I'm gonna go in and have lunch, and I actually did buy a whole bunch of wire, some fairly thick wire that I can make some slightly smaller hoops out of. And then I'm gonna take inventory of all those random pieces of mesh and see if I can come up with a better system that the deer can't destroy. I'm also looking at electric fencing for the rest of the season, but for now I just need to make sure that I save my tulips and my spring planting. So make sure that you're following me on Instagram. I'm on there almost every day posting a couple of things so that you can see how all of this is progressing. I'd love it if you would like and subscribe. Love to have you following along. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.